intersection of Riverside Drive, and from Bronson Avenue. Kitty Corner, literally across the river from the Carleton University. It has a wealth of infrastructure to support a range of different outdoor recreation, sports, and hobby-related activities. Here's but a snapshot capturing some of the outdoor infrastructure that's available: softball pitches, soccer pitches, as well as an indoor soccer pitch to go with volleyball and outdoor swimming pool, etc. Next slide, please. So that significant and substantial chunk of infrastructure actually supports an organization that has over 22,000 members, covering a range of different activities. And that the outside piece we just saw with the infrastructure is but a part of the programming that they offer. They also offer programming in support of hobbies, and as well as in support of meetings and a whole range of other things, in addition to on-site food. Next slide, please, Mark. So very briefly, the RA at its heart really is about respect for others and diversity, and it's really about establishing and growing a diverse and respectful community that supports a broader sense of mental health and wellness. Next slide, please, Mark. So yeah, I listed a few, here's some snapshots of some of the activities you'll find when you walk through the front doors of the RA. Not only is there a gym, and not only do you also have curling, there's also pickleball and judo and archery and stand club, and there's photography club. It's just amazing the opportunities you have and the events you can participate in when you become a member of the RA. Next slide, please. Now, if the RA, and I'm going to use an analogy, some people are just going to start rolling their eyes at because I'm sure everyone want to get to this point in time. So if the RA is a gem in the city of Ottawa, the RACCC really is the diamond. The RACCC was actually started off as the Aeronautical Camping Club, I believe, in 1952, and up until 2012, it was part of the YWCA. It is an organized and led by volunteers. All of our members are volunteers, including our instructors, with the exception of a few instances where we sometimes hire outside experts. Next slide, please. And we offer a range, a fairly comprehensive range of services, both from the standpoint of supporting and organizing, day, weekend, and longer trips, as well as providing training and across a range of different programs in terms of flat water, white water family. We also have a sea kayak program as well. That training is delivered in most instances by members of the club who provide their time on a volunteer basis. To allow those, you don't need a kayak and you don't need a canoe to participate. We also have a fairly significant clubhouse where we have canoes and kayaks and other related infrastructure and pieces of equipment that can be rented to support activities. Next slide. And at this point in time, what I'd like to do is to return to the topic of today's conversation, which is about Canoe for Change, and specifically about Glenn and Carol and their wonderful journey. So I'm going to very shortly hand the mic over to them to sort of introduce themselves. And then what we're going to do through the rest of today's seminar is really sort of have a bit of not kind of an interview, but an open Q&A. So I have a series of questions that I've sort of developed that I've previously shared with Glenn and Carol, structured around a couple of core themes. A bit about their journey, a bit about the book, and writing the book, and a bit about where they are going forward. I actually probably anticipated one of my questions by my opening comments earlier about they have plans for the summer, but nonetheless. But at the same point in time, I imagine our club members, the people who are here today, may have questions as well. So feel free to raise your hand, or if you wish to pin a question or a comment in the chat, feel free to do that. And at that point in time, very specifically, if the link right here is for the book for Canoe for Change. It's an outstanding read. It really is. It's lovely in terms of filled with a wonderful sense of humor, but also that opportunity for the journey reflecting personal insight. And so on that note, I'll hand it over for the next little bit to Glenn and Carol so they can introduce themselves. Glenn, Carol, over to you.
Oh, thank you. First of all, we would like to thank the RA Canoe Camping Club for inviting us to the show, and Steve for hosting the seminar. That's wonderful. Carol and I looked at your website, and we think it's a great way for members and potential members to get motivated for the great outdoors. So kudos to your club. I'd like to take a moment and orient your audience and reveal a little bit about ourselves. Carol and I are empty nesters, and in our second relationship, we have 4 grown children and 5 grandchildren, and we live in Kingston, Ontario. We belong to the Rideau Trail Association. We're trail maintainers for a section near Westport, Ontario, and we belong to the Aeronautical Canoe Club. Carol and I are no strangers to the great outdoors. We enjoy biking, hiking, snowshoeing, backcountry skiing, and anything that gets us outdoors. We believe that this stems from our parents' upbringing in taking us camping in our youth. Canoe wilderness adventures has always been our passion, trips that would take us into the remote areas of Northern Ontario or Northern Quebec. Over the years, we have backpacked in Portugal, completing the Roto Vicentina Trail, and have hiked up an active volcano in Ecuador, and trekked from Neiva to Todos Santos in Guatemala. We have also spent a week hiking down into the Grand Canyon and have explored many canyons in Utah. But in early 2017, while hiking the Mojave Desert, our tent blew down in a sandstorm. That was a defining moment, and we decided to return to our real passion. We thought it would be far easier to travel on water than to carry water to survive for many days. So we focused on an early retirement and rewarded ourselves with what we call an epic retirement cruise, and decided to paddle across Canada. And while doing so, we would champion a cause and raise funds and awareness.
So we raised funds and awareness for an organization called Loving Spoonful. And we thought, while we paddle across Canada, we should have a cause that is passionate, that we're passionate about. So the Loving Spoonful is a nonprofit organization, and they serve Kingston and area. And in Canada, 1 out of 7 people are food insecure, and that's about 14.6% of all Canadians. So it's a big issue in Canada. And when we started in 2017, food security was one of those not so common terms. So we felt we needed to raise awareness about food security, and also raise funds for the organization that works so tirelessly to make a better community for Kingston. So what they believe, their mission is that they believe that all Canadians should have access to fresh, healthy food. And people that, individuals that can't afford fresh, healthy food suffer from social isolation, physical and mental health problems. And Loving Spoonful believes that everyone has a right to healthy, fresh food, and everybody should have access to that. So the mission of the organization is to connect people with good food, and they do that by various programs within the organization. And one of my favorite programs that they have is the community kitchen program. So they bring in people from the community, they learn how to cook with fresh, healthy food on a budget, and then they take home food for their families, to supply them for the week or for a few meals anyway. And it's a great learning component, because a lot of people don't really have the skills to learn how to cook from fresh natural food. So it's a great program that they have. And they also have fresh market stands that surround the city, where people can access fresh vegetables and fruit, and sometimes fresh bread with dignity. They have a community garden program, and they have, that's just a few.
It's a wonderful organization.
Yeah, they work very hard. And the reason we chose that charity was it's near and dear to my heart, because in my early 30s, I contracted a virus that left my immune system compromised. And I was ill for a few years, and I went to a doctor of functional medicine that put me on a just back to basic food plan, which consisted of fresh vegetables, like fresh foods, no processed foods, no sugar, cut back on the alcohol, and it's just no fun at all. But anyway, that diet, after 2 weeks, I was like a different person. I felt 100% better. My symptoms were gone. And I thought, oh my goodness, like what a difference healthy food can make. And anyway, just became passionate about that. And I thought, if I have the chance and I'm able to afford healthy food, everybody should have that right, because a lot of people can't afford it. So
Yeah.
Especially these days, with the pandemic and food prices rising, it's becoming more of an issue. So anyway, that's just a little bit about the charity and about the non-for-profit. And I worked with a non-for-profit for 13 years. So staff and volunteers, they put their heart and soul into enhancing the availability of the quality of life for individuals and communities that they serve. And when we were looking for a nonprofit to support, we were looking for a dedication, same kind of dedication that so many have in Loving Spoonful. Everything that they did was in line with our beliefs, and their dedication and their work that they do in the community is just 5-star. It's very it's excellent.
Top shelf.
Yeah. Top shelf. So yeah, so that's anyway a little bit about the nonprofit that we supported. We raised, by the end of the 3 years, we raised about $28,000, and we continue to raise funds for them. So we're well over $30,000 now. So yeah. So yeah.
Well,
That's who we are.
Thank you for that. And well done, by the way, on continuing to raise money for what is obviously an organization that fills a need in a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us back to 2017. So in 2017, we decided we're going to paddle across Canada. So being it was Canada's 150th, we decided to leave from Ottawa, Petrie Island, and head east to the East Coast. We retired, I retired mid-summer, Carol early spring. So we got away mid-season, but we thought, we'll cut our teeth on the section that goes east and complete the first leg there.
Excellent. Sorry?
I was going to say, is Mark going to scroll the photos in the
I was just checking in with him on that.
Okay.
Mark's trying, but Windows is being Microsoft again.
Okay.
Oh.
No, not to worry. Not to worry. I'll draw some pictures.
You'll figure it out, Mark.
Yeah, so
there we go. Oh, we lost you, Mark.
So when I set up the slideshow. It won't let me open another window to share the screen. And when I try to share the screen, it won't let me run the slideshow.
Oh, well, that's going to be tricky.
I'll keep working on it. Meanwhile, you keep talking.
Sure, we can do that. We can do that. So
Please.
I was just going to say, so we started in Ottawa and made our way to the East Coast. We eventually ended up in Sydney, Nova Scotia. Along the way, it was quite a learning curve for us. We had to dehydrate a lot of meals. We encountered various obstacles, but we had fun along the way. We camped in great places, different places, met a lot of interesting people, went from navigating tides and currents to being chased out of shipping lanes by the Coast Guard as we left Montreal. Yeah, it was interesting.
So actually, perhaps I can jump in here with the very first things. My sort of first question.
Okay.
Which is, you broke the trip into sort of three parts, right? As illustrated in the book.
Yeah.
Sort of, how did you land on those three parts? Like, did you have like very specific predefined? And then the other question I have as well would be, because like, given the nature of this particular journey, which part did you find the most challenging? Was it that first part, like getting underway and getting going? So
Okay, well, we intended on doing the cross Canada trek in 2 years. We did intend to go to the East Coast the first year. The second year, we started in Vancouver, and we had all good intentions of getting back to Ottawa and then paddling back to Kingston on the Rideau Canal. But we're retired, so we're not young, and we're taking our time, and we're enjoying life as we go. So we only got as far as Fort Frances, Ontario in that second year before it snowed on us and winter closed in quickly. So we had to pick it up the third year and start at Fort Frances and make our way back to Ottawa and then to Kingston. So it was going to be a 2-year journey, but it ended up being 3. And if it had to, it would have been 4. It would have been 5. It was great, but no, we did it in 3 years at a nice pace.
So was the first, like, I'm curious, was the first stretch, that first year, the most difficult perhaps, like because of getting your routine down, or could you give us a little insight on that?
I think so. You know, we had 8,515 kilometers ahead of us. And when we first left Petrie Island, and we were finished 10 kilometers or whatever it was the first day, you know, at the end of the day, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, we have 8,514, what is it?
The math.
Whatever, yeah. Kilometers left. And it was almost like, oh no, I hope we can do this. You know, what have we got ourselves into? And you get those kind of, you know, like second butterflies. And yeah, there we are on Petrie Island. And we took our little granddaughter with us for the first few days. And as we were leaving, she was crying for her mother. And I was crying because I thought, oh my, what did we do? So, but anyway, it turned out great.
Yeah, it was a learning curve.
Yeah.
We had to load the canoe a certain way. We had to be prepared for salt water, which happened quicker than we expected. So there was a lot of adversities that we had to deal with, but you know, we got it down to a fine science, and whatever obstacle we were up against, we managed to either get around it or move through it or do a transition or adjust or pivot or whatever the word is. We just did it. But it was definitely a learning curve. The second and third year were far better.
I was about to say,
the first year too, we didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of research on every waterway that we went through or every hydroelectric dam we had to go. We just kind of winged it. And, one of the things that we found out just before we left was there's tides in the St. Lawrence River. Like that, of course, that's obvious, but it wasn't to us when we were planning this because we were so busy planning everything else. And there's a real trick to paddling in the tides. You can't always, when the tide's going out, you go close to be in the middle of the river to catch the current. But when the tide's coming back in, you have to paddle along the edge of the river. And we of course found that out the hard way when we were in the middle of the river when the tide was coming in and we were going nowhere.
Yeah.
So it's just those little things that we got used to. But once we did, it was a learning curve for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing one of the images I had in my head actually from having read your book was, as you said, about navigating the shipping lanes and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, at the port of Old Montreal, we talked to the lock keeper, and we actually spent the night on the pier. She didn't recommend that late in the day we get out into the swift water, so she said we should not go anywhere. And I said, well, we have no place to go. Do you recommend some place we can go camping? And she says, no, you're in downtown Montreal. And I said, what about the cement pier right here? Can we put our tent up? She goes, no one's ever asked permission to do that before. But she thought about it and she says, but I'll have to charge you a mooring fee for your 18-foot canoe. And I said, how much would that be? She says, it's $1 a foot. So I gave her $18 and thanked her very much. And we set up our tent right on the cement pier there in plain view of the general public and restaurants and everything. But we weren't going to go out into the current that day. Yeah. Now, the next day, she notified the Coast Guard that a canoe vessel was coming through the current. So could they have a lookout for us? And we navigated the currents, the swift water, nicely, and avoided the tour boats that were out and about. And but we remained in the shipping lane because the current was great and we were traveling. But a Coast Guard Zodiac boat chased us down and told us that we were in danger. We were in the shipping lanes, and could we please remove ourselves from the shipping lane? And we never even thought about that. Yeah. We were like a danger, right?
Yeah, no
but,
kidding.
When you see one of those mammoth boats barreling down on you, you just want to paddle like hell and get out of the way, I'll tell you.
True enough. So actually, my next question. So a little bit about your journey. So a past chair of the Canoe Camping Club, Scott Campbell, and I, in a previous seminar, were doing a little bit of the private chat back and forth, and we were comparing stories of like portages that are just from hell, that just never stop and go on and on and on. So in that context, could you tell us a little bit about how you portage the Continental Divide?
Yes. Well, we wanted to make it a true coast-to-coast journey on our own steam. So others have started at Kicking Horse in Alberta and made their way east. We decided to go right to the Pacific. And we knew we were going to have this big obstacle in the way, the Rocky Mountains, but we were prepared for it. And like I say, this was a journey that was a cruise for us, and we wanted to take our time and see everything. So we did the Rockies in 3 different modes. We prearranged some mountain bikes, and when we got to Hope, British Columbia, we transitioned from canoe to mountain bikes. So we put our canoe in a storage container, a sea container, and bicycled and pedaled the Kettle Valley Rail Trail system, which is a network of recreational trails that have been converted from railway lines. And that was an item that was on our bucket list anyway. So we just stroked that off and did the paddle, did the cycle to Nelson, British Columbia. And then we reobtained our canoe. And then from there, the rest of the way into Alberta, we walked and or paddled, depending on where we found a waterway. And how we portaged our canoe by walking is we put it on a canoe cart, loaded all our gear into it, and just rolled it on the side of the highway. And it was quite comical at times to see cyclists paddling across Canada passing us, and then of course motorists looking at us, sometimes several days at a time as they were going, commuting back and forth to work, waving at us and honking. And yeah, but that's how we did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got to the Alberta, you coming downhill, you never seen two more happier people than us when we dipped our toes into the Old Man River.
Our blistered feet.
Our blistered feet, yeah. And then the Old Man River transitioned into the South Saskatchewan River. And we were amazed as we paddled right through the prairies and going through a canyon, a river canyon, right through the prairies. I always thought growing up, the prairies were flat. You know, you'd hear stories, people would drive and they'd see, you know, the car approaching and, you know, 48 hours later, the car would pass you, right? But
yeah.
No, this canyon was unbelievable with coulees, and it was like a desert weather conditions there, with cactus and rattlesnakes, and it was truly amazing. I was learning something new every day.
Next question. So among the things I appreciated in reading your book were the details of some of the locations. And then when I saw some of your photos, like they're just absolutely breathtaking. So would you be able to share with us a couple of the more memorable locations you may have visited on your trip?
Sure.
Yeah, there was a time where it was really a special occasion for me. Was we were paddling on Lake Superior, and Lake Superior can be pretty unforgiving at times, and we were almost at Sault Ste. Marie, and we basically got blown into an island in Batchewana Bay. And it was Batchewana Bay is quite huge, on Lake Superior, and we had no choice but to go to this island, which we later found out was a private island that has never been inhabited or has any kind of development on it. It was absolutely beautiful there. And anyway, we were windbound there for a couple of days, and we needed to leave the next day, but the only way we could was by getting up very early in the morning. So we went to bed quite early the night before, which is, I don't know, about 7 or 8 o'clock. And we got up at 2, and we had our coffee and breakfast, and got into our canoe, and it was pitch black.
Pitch black.
The moon was out for, I think, a few hours, but had gone behind it was just a very clear night, but it was gone. So by the time we set out at 3 o'clock, we were paddling in total darkness, and we had to use the compass to make sure that we were on the right track, and the GPS somewhat. And it just so happened that it was a very clear night, and as we were paddling, we saw a meteor shower, and it was the most amazing meteor shower we had ever seen. And it just so happened to be the Perseus meteor shower in August. And it's just that, you see meteors, but to see so many all at once, and, they were just shooting across the sky as we were dipping our paddles into the water. It was such a special moment. It was one of those rare moments that
it was like fireworks going off.
Yeah. And we did cross a huge bay by the time it got windy again, so that was just a special moment, one of many, actually.
one of many.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for sharing. I have a question from our audience. So a previous photo back, it looked like Glenn may have been cooking, and there was the tent, and then there was a grizzly bear.
Oh.
So the question was,
Okay, I knew
bear-
somebody was going to mention, like, that's not real. Somebody photoshopped that as a joke on us.
Yeah, I would have taken that out. I forgot that was in there.
Yeah, we
It
forgot
from
that was
another
in-
presentation, yeah.
But that was a joke. But
Thanks for watching, though, and noticing that.
but wildlife, we did see many bears, wolves, coyotes, pelicans. I do have a bear story that it's not a grizzly bear story, not,
Go.
but it is a black bear story, but he was big. Could have been a grizzly, but he wasn't. But we were stranded on Lake Winnipeg. Actually, Lake Winnipeg was not kind to us at all, but I can go on for a couple of stories, but this particular one with the bear, we were stranded for a couple of days on a beach, just windbound. And it was my turn to do the dishes after dinner. So I walked way down the shoreline away from camp to rinse and clean the dishes. And on my way down to that section I thought I heard a voice in my head. And it was so real to me that I stopped and I turned and I looked into the woods, and then I looked back to see where Carol was way down. And I thought, Glenn, your psychic is playing with you. It's just the wind. The wind has been howling for days, but obviously it's going through the trees or whatever, and you're hearing a voice. So I continued on, only to stop a few paces again and turn and look again, because I'm hearing a voice. But we haven't seen individuals for days, a long time. So I carry on, down washing the dishes. The sun is at my back. I'm casting a shadow as I wash the dishes, bent over, and then a shadow looms over me. And I quickly stand up and turn around and look into the sun, and there's Carol. She goes, "You forgot a dish." And I went, "Holy smokes, I thought you were a bear. You almost gave me a coronary." And then I look past Carol, and here comes lumbering down the beach a bear. And I'm like, to Carol, now she's looking right at me. I said, "There's a bear." And she's laughing like, "Haha, you pulled that joke on me before." So I take her shoulders and I turn her around. I said, "See, there's a bear." So I start going, "Yo, bear, yo, whoa, 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 bear." And he's still coming. He's got his head down. He's just lumber. Carol goes very calmly, "He cannot hear you. You're going to have to bang the pots together." And no hesitation by me. I pick up the pots and I start banging them. And all of a sudden he looks and he's got this, and the hair stands up in the back of his neck, and he turns and it does an about face and runs away. And I felt really bad that I scared this bear. I'm like, we're in his space, and I made him shoo away. But I thought, the size of that bear, I'm kind of glad he turned and he ran. But that night I built the biggest barricade around the tent that I'd ever built, all out of driftwood.
As if that would help.
Yeah, I'm sure. It was just
If it
something
makes
in
you
me.
feel better.
I thought that little added bit of protection, if I hear a snap of a branch or something or broke, I would be more protected, but it is what it is.
Well, thank you for sharing. So actually, Paul has a question. What resources did you use to select your route?
Oh, good question. We used the resources from our history books, actually. So we used a lot of the Indigenous routes and the Voyageur routes across Canada. So the Voyager routes we basically used, and we found we did a lot of research on the websites, and we found an individual that had paddled across Canada from coast to coast, which is what we wanted to do. And he his name's Mike Ranta, and he had a route all planned out that was on his website. So we called him up, or we contacted him and said, "Is it okay if we use your route?" So, and he was more than happy to share that route and information with us. So that's basically what we did. So we used Mike Ranta's route across Canada.
Yeah.
And he was on hand to help us with logistics, like a little bit, you know, and different places that we had questions about. So we talked to him on the phone a few times, and he's a really great guy that's paddled across Canada 3 times himself.
Yeah, wealth of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The next question, this is from Judith. As part of your journey, did you paddle the Bow River? I don't know when you cross over. No.
No, we were further south. We did the Old Man River, and then the South Saskatchewan River, which went into the Saskatchewan River.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we were considering doing the Bow River, but apparently there's a lot of hydroelectric dams on there. I'm not 100% sure, don't quote me on that, but when we spoke to Mike, we asked him about that because we thought it'd be a nicer route. And he said, you have to go down the Old Man River. It's absolutely beautiful. And we were so happy that we did. It was absolutely gorgeous. And the Old Man River turns into the South Saskatchewan River, that turns into the Saskatchewan River. And it's a 2,000 kilometer river journey that goes right into Lake Winnipeg. And we hardly saw any paddlers on there.
No,
it was just amazing that not many people actually paddle that route. So we mostly felt isolated. There's not a lot of roads that go down to these rivers, and they do pass towns and some cities along the way where we usually stop to resupply. But yeah, so that's the rivers we took.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions here? I think that's Teresa, I'm not certain I understand your question. If you could please clarify. And Teresa, if you wanted to just jump in.
Somebody had mentioned the bear, so I was just wondering, in a photo, I was just wondering where the photos were. But I went into their book and I saw some of the photos, beautiful, beautiful photos. I didn't see the bear though.
Yeah, no, we never had our
I wasn't
camera.
Interested in taking a picture of the bear. I was just wanting them to move on.
You never had your camera when you need it.
Right, of course not. Okay, yeah.
And we had so many wildlife experiences, Teresa. It was really beautiful, but we never really captured photos of them. You know, but you know, there's deer that you come down to the water to drink, and they were just outside their tent, and you could hear them first thing in the morning. And or a coyote, you know, howling because he didn't know what this tent was in front of him that was in his way. And we actually saw on the South Saskatchewan River an antelope, which I've never ever seen before. I even knew we had in Canada, and that was so interesting because she had her young with her as well.
Yeah,
and we saw a lot of wildlife out west. We saw cougar and bighorn sheep. It was just, when you're going down the lake, as many of you know, or a river, and it's solitary, you do have a chance to see wildlife, and we're quiet when we paddle. We don't always have, you know, hours of conversation. Sometimes we have hours of silence, and it's a great way to see wildlife and reflect on the nature around you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So actually another question. So 2 weeks ago, we had another seminar where some members from the club shared, you know, best practices, experiences, favorite meals, favorite recipes. So given your dehydration and given how many meals you've dehydrated, were there some recipes of yours that were particular favorites, and any links to a recipe in particular that you would offer up to the club?
Yes, but if I could go just a step back and
Yeah.
say the first leg of our journey, we learned a lot about food preparation.
Mm.
So a 2-week trip in backcountry is so different than a 5-month trip, because everything that we took with us, we had to dehydrate ourselves because we couldn't carry a lot of weight with us. So everything was dehydrated. The first year I had made, I think, 60 prepared meals. And there was a variety of 6 meals that we had for 12 weeks. And by the end of that, we were so sick of these dehydrated prepared meals. Not only that, but we didn't have enough calories to sustain us. So we lost an awful lot of weight, and we didn't have enough fat in our diet. So we became, our brains
Lethargic
became
and
foggy,
yeah.
and there was not enough fiber. And so the following winter, I did a lot of research on counting calories and what foods we needed to sustain us. So I dehydrated all kinds of vegetables, all kinds of fruit, all kinds of, black beans, kidney beans, all kinds of things. So along the trail, any given day, I could just prepare whatever I wanted. And we would resupply at different towns or cities with our staples like oatmeal and brown rice, not white rice, lentils, quinoa, all those wholesome grains that would sustain us and that have more fiber and vitamins and calories in them. So it was a learning process. And the trick is to have a great big bag of spices, so you can cook up almost anything. It's make anything flavorful. And at first the meals were horrible, but eventually they got pretty good, and we got pretty creative, because you have a lot of time in the canoe to think about what you're going to make at supper time.
Yeah.
So but as for a favorite recipe, I think our favorite recipe has to be a pasta dish that we make. So everything that we take is dehydrated, like I mentioned. We can't take cans, we can't take bread. Glenn's allergic to tree nuts, and I'm celiac, so I can't eat wheat or gluten. So that provides a whole other challenge. So this pasta dish is quinoa noodles, or pasta, the spaghetti kind. And we have dehydrated sweet peppers and lots of mushrooms that we add to that, sun-dried tomatoes, bacon or dried sausage, prepared bacon or dried sausage, and a little bit of spices, whatever you want to
It's very tasty.
Lots of olive oil and dehydrated cheese. So that is one of our favorite recipes. That is also on our website, canoeforchange.ca. We've got a recipe section there. And that's quite enjoyable. We always look forward to that. It's not a one-pot meal. It's not always that easy to make, but we, for good days, we would go to the trouble of making that. Now, with regards to food, we didn't spend a whole lot of time cooking because most of the day, we spent 8 hours a day on the water, 8 to 10 hours sometimes. And we tried to make it as simple as possible. So we would cook up 4 servings at supper time, eat 2 at supper, and then eat 2 for lunch the next day. And that's how we did it. So we didn't have to worry about lunch, and we just threw it in our day pack and had it for lunch the next day. It was pretty easy.
Yeah. So basically, what we had for dinner that night, we would have for lunch the following day, just cold version.
Yeah. So we got kind of used to eating cold food, and it actually tasted pretty good.
It was all right. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you wanted to heat it up, just put it in the sun.
Yeah.
So from Suzanne, the next question is, what piece of gear did you find that was most useful? And what piece of gear did you find was more useful than you thought it would be? And was there any piece of gear that you dumped along the way because it did not turn out as useful as you expected?
Yes, good question. Yeah, because this happened to us. A piece of gear that we would always take and would be our lightweight tarp. We'd never go anywhere without this tarp. We could just put it up in a flash and get out of the rain, or give us some relief from the sun if we're at a campsite. Our piece of gear on our second year journey that we mailed home was at the bug shelter. We took with us a bug zone shelter, and our second year from Vancouver to Fort Francis, somewhere along that way, we mailed it back home. We thought the bugs would be horrendous, and we couldn't survive without it, but we didn't use it the second year. So we did ship that back home just to reduce our weight.
And it was a very dry year. That was 2018.
Yeah, it was very dry.
Very dry. So there was not a lot of mosquitoes, and yeah, we just didn't have use for it. So why lug that around? But the third year, oh my goodness, we brought it with us.
Yeah,
and
we brought it with us.
I think
the
we
third
used
year.
it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great to be away from the bugs that were relentless at night.
but definitely we would always take our lightweight tarp.
Perfect. So what training, if any, did you undertake before the journey? That's from Teresa.
Training to get in shape. I'm thinking.
Yeah, training to get in shape.
Our regiment for exercise is just daily. It's like in the introduction, we're always biking, hiking, going for walks, whatever. So we didn't do any sort of strength training or endurance. We just kept a normal regiment of being active, and then we kind of conditioned ourselves as we paddled, and got a little stronger, and our stamina increased every day. But no special training, just keep busy, keep active.
Question. I already know this. I asked you before, but from the community, from Judith, was your canoe a lightweight Souris? What was the make of your canoe? Oh,
our canoe, it is an H2O. It's a carbon Kevlar. Without the splash deck fitted to it, it only weighs 38 pounds.
Paul, I think you may have already referenced this, but did you ever find yourselves paddling at night in order to paddle in calm conditions?
Well, there's a scene right there. Yeah, we would never paddle all night long. We would just we would get up really early in the morning. You know, 3 o'clock in the morning. And get out there at 4 or 5 to beat the wind, because especially the big waters, you have to get out early. You have to get out at least by 6 o'clock, and to beat the winds, and then you stop a little earlier if the winds pick up. So we did do the most distance first thing in the morning when it was calm.
We found that once the sun came up, the higher the sun got in the day, it started to warm the landscape. Then the winds picked up. So out in the coolness of the early morning was our savior.
Oh, and the winds were relentless.
Oh, the winds were relentless.
That was one of the surprises. Well, we all know it gets windy, but I never really realized how windy it was out on the water all the time. I don't know if the winds have increased because of global warming, but it just always seemed to be in our face. But oh well.
I think that's just a general thing. No matter where I'm paddling, if the river all of a sudden turns north or south or east or west, the wind is always in my face.
Yep, that's the way it goes.
And when the wind was in our favor and it was good conditions, we had a little sail that we used to speed up the progress a little bit.
Take a break,
we didn't use it that often, maybe a dozen times, something like that, but it was nice to have. as a break. Not that we still steered and we still had to hold the sail, but
Yeah.
it was nice to fly along like that sometimes.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So I imagine there was a little bit of whitewater on your trip at different points in time.
Yeah, but we picked and chose our battles with whitewater. The canoe was our only mode of transportation, and we didn't want to damage it. We
Yes.
didn't want to get stranded. We didn't want to lose any gear. And our experience with whitewater, and I'll admit it, it's not that good. Like we don't do well in whitewater, so we always scouted what was ahead, and if it looked doable, we certainly did it. But we didn't take any unnecessary chances.
Another question from Teresa. Are there any really scary moments apart from meeting bears?
Well, we did have an incident when we were going over the Rocky Mountains, and we were lugging, pulling, pushing our canoe on the cart, and the highway wasn't this particularly appealing to cyclists and to walkers. It was very narrow, guardrail, and then the cliff down to the bottom. And we had come up behind us a very wide load of a commercial excavator on a transport truck, and I don't think he saw us as in the distance, but he came upon us very quickly. It might even have been a blind corner. I can't remember, but we were pushed right up against the guardrail because we saw him coming, and he swerved a little bit, and thank goodness there was nobody in the oncoming lane of traffic, or it would have been an awful wreck. But he just missed us by feet. Maybe feet is generous, but he came pretty close to us, and that was scary. But as far as being in the wilderness, no, we weren't. We didn't feel threatened. We didn't feel unsafe at all. But when we were near humans and automobiles, I guess that was the biggest threat for us.
And there were lots of times too that when we were on the water, sometimes the waves got a little bit too big for us to handle, and they started capping, and sometimes you just can't get off the water because there's no place to leave, and that's really scary, to be in that kind of a situation. And we always try to avoid that, but sometimes you just can't. So we really had to get used to paddling in swells and high waves, and that sometimes gets
really nerve-wracking, very nervous.
Yeah. And then when we're going down the Old Man River and the South Saskatchewan River, it was spring, so the water was flowing pretty quick. So sometimes around a corner, you never knew it was coming around the corner, but you could just see the water start to speed up. And most of the time it was fine until you heard it, until we said to each other, "Do you hear that noise?
What's that noise?
What's that noise?" And then it's time to scout out whatever's ahead and see if we could do it or not. And, we can do class 1. We're comfortable in class 1 and 2, but with 3, anything higher than 3, we usually walk through it or portage around it.
Yeah. Now, we did have an instance on Lake Winnipeg. I said Lake Winnipeg was not kind to us. We did capsize in Lake Winnipeg.
Wow.
And like I say, on our canoe, we had a splash skirt, and we took on a little more than we wanted to distance-wise this particular day. We got up very early. We had to paddle around what they call Long Point, which jutted out into Lake Winnipeg, and we got an early start for the calm weather, the wind. But as we made it around the point, the winds picked up, and the landscape was unforgiving. There was no place to come ashore. It was just rocky, rough, unforgiving terrain. So we had the only decision that we could do was to continue paddling to get down back to where the shoreline was more gradual away from this point. And we just about made it to where the land leveled out a bit, but we got caught by a rogue wave, broadsided us, flipped us over immediately. We were fatigued, like I say, we probably weren't using our best judgment, you know, and but we were all right. Everything was contained in the canoe under the splash deck. We hauled the canoe up onto the shoreline and spread everything out, did an inventory, dried our clothes, dried our gear, put our tent up for the night. And like on Lake Winnipeg, you don't see anybody for days. And we hadn't seen anybody for days going around Long Point. And no sooner have we got all our gear set up and our tent and we're drying things out, when I looked down the shoreline and two gentlemen were walking towards us, First Nations individuals, and one had a rifle slung over his shoulder. And I was taken back by this. I thought to myself, where did you guys come from? And why do you have the rifle? And they said, we were watching you paddle down the coastline. We're up on the cliff up here. We have a family retreat up here, and we're up here for several days. And we watched you paddle, and we watched you disappear and reappear with every wave that you took. And then you disappeared completely. So we came down to investigate. And, I thanked them profusely. I said, well, thank you for doing that and coming down to make sure we're okay. But what's with the big fire tonight? And I'm like, you got it. And we built a huge fire that night. And then the next morning, two other individuals from the camp up high on the cliff came down and asked how we managed the night. And we said, quite fine. Thank you for coming down and checking on us. And then they wanted to know our story. And we told them that, we were paddling down the rest of Lake Winnipeg. And they gave us some invaluable information about what to expect going down the coastline, that there was fishing huts that were just, off the shore into the woods at various locations. And if at any time it was rough, we could use one of these First Nations emergency shelters, and don't hesitate. And then they said, what time are you planning on packing up? And I thought it was a peculiar question. I thought, well, are you wanting us to rush? But he was just making conversation. I said, shortly after we finish breakfast, we're going to be leaving. And so off they went, and we did pack up and leave. And as we were paddling down the coastline, the entire community that was up there having a family retreat were down at the shoreline sitting cross-legged. And then as we passed, they stood up and they all said, good luck, safe voyage. And that really touched my heart. And I felt a real sense of humbleness at that. And that was really, that was quite rewarding to me. I'll never forget that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
So Bob asked, first Lynette, did you ever lose your way?
Not really.
No,
not
we
too
were,
often.
I'm a little bit, Bob, I'm a little bit from old school. I'm a map and compass guy, and we had to do a transition because we were doing this fundraiser and doing social media. So we kind of did the transition to electronics and got a GPS, and I downloaded the route on the GPS, but I still took with me a compass, and I took almost like a road map of Canada with me. So I'd always know roughly what the big picture was. And aside from maybe taking on a through Lake of the Woods, where there's so many islands, making a wrong turn at an island, but you know, that was only momentarily until you found your way and got back. So we never did get a major detour and get lost. No.
Maybe for a couple hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, not for days and days.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
So actually along that line, somebody with the initial W has asked specifically not only how you planned your navigation, which I think you've already discussed, which was how did you get your weather info? And did you just look at the sky, or did you use some other set of tools?
Well, Robert Boggs, who lives in Ottawa and is a friend of ours, he's a meteorologist, and I think he's also a member of the RA CC Club. He gave us long-term weather forecasts, which was pretty good.
Pretty
yeah,
good.
pretty accurate. Yeah, and that was good. We had we didn't have service a lot. We had our cell phone with us, but we didn't have data a lot, so we couldn't really rely on that. When we were away from data for a long time, we never really knew what the weather was. We you know, you kind of read you get to learn to read the weather patterns after a while. So if the wind's coming from the east, you know it's going to rain in a couple of days, and usually it's a lot of rain, so you prepare for that. And there's different cloud formations that we got used to and that we recognize, you know, when thunderstorms were coming, or you know, hot and cold weather, hot and cold airflows, that type of thing. But we also had a little weather radio that worked some of the time, not all the time, but sometimes we had a weather radio as well, which kind of broke on us.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really much use. So yeah, it wasn't really too much of a
No, but I think
concern.
the best advice that the First Nations individual gave to us when we asked him what the weather was going to be like a particular day, he's just said, what you see is what you get. So
Yeah, look at the sky.
just look at the sky. What you
get.
see is what you're going to get. So
Yeah.
So actually MGS has raised their hand. Mark.
Yeah, just interesting that you mentioned Robert, because coming up, I'll have to check the date, but he's doing a seminar for us on reading the weather when you're on canoe trips.
That's right. Yes, that's right. He mentioned that.
Yeah.
We'll be
excellent.
watching.
We'll be
it.
watching that.
Yeah.
Great cross promotion, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question from Bob was about campsites. You know, did you have to book some of your campsites in advance? You know, or how did you find your campsites?
These campsites, Bob, they're like, we never knew where we were going to be any particular day. So like some days we might get lucky and do 40K, other days 10K, depending on the weather. So wherever we found a spot on the side of the river, lake, shore, and it looked like we could camp there, we camped there. If we weren't sure whether it was Crown land or private land, we always tried to walk and find the landowner and ask permission. And but no, we never booked any sites in advance. We just didn't know where we were going to be.
The question from Lynette. She noticed that in many of the photos, Glenn, you're in the bow. Did you switch up bow stern paddling, or did you just settle into the rules that work best for you?
Yeah, we found what works best for us is I'm in the bow and I've got the big beaver paddle. It's wider. And I classify myself as the wheel horse. So I'm doing the digging in the paddle. And Carol, she's delicate, but she's got finesse, and she knows how to steer the canoe, and she's got more of an otter tail paddle. And Carol had a nice lightweight, crafted, handmade otter tail
Mhm.
paddle.
Mhm.
And yeah, but Carol, no, I can't steer a canoe.
Oh, yeah.
But Carol, like she can thread the needle on steering the canoe. So we do what we do best. I just grunt and paddle, and Carol does all the fine-tuned stuff.
Paddle harder.
Yeah. I wasn't even sure she was paddling when I'm at the front, right? I'm just paddling. Maybe she was like back at this, doing this. I don't know.
Oh.
So a question from Catherine. Did you have any emergency signal device?
We had a Spot with us, a Spot tracking device. So if we ran into trouble, we could just press that SOS button.
Yeah.
We never had to do that. But the nice thing about the Spot tracking device was every hour pinpoint where we are. And that was also, the map was also on our website. So followers could see where we were at any given point. And our family knew where we were, and if we ran into trouble, then we had a backup that way. Mm-hmm.
And we also programmed into the Spot. There's an all okay button, so we had a pre-programmed message, and we were religious on every day pressing that we were okay, so that our contact people back home would get an email message on their phone, reassuring them that we were okay every day.
From Daniel, did you ever get bored? Good question, Daniel. Did you ever get bored? Did you find paddling for days on end, especially in large lakes, monotonous or tiresome?
Well, I never really did. There's always so much to see. And I think you have to have a real appreciation for nature to, to absorb everything that's around you. Like the water looks different every day. The rocks are all unique in different areas. The landscape is beautiful. And sometimes the days were long. But Glenn's a great paddling partner. And if it did get a little bit boring, he would entertain me with 40-year-old Timex commercials. He would do great renditions of that. We had lots of fun, in the meantime as well, and reflected on our lives. We were 60 years old, and we had just finished our careers. This was a time for us to unwind,
relax,
and we had both had busy office jobs that we came from. So it was a real nice opportunity to connect back to the earth, back to nature. And it was very relaxing. You get a sense of freedom when you've got the river or a big lake in front of you, and you have weeks and weeks ahead of you where you can just decide whatever you want to do. We get up at first thing in the morning, and we'd say, well, let's try to make it there. And if we don't, that's fine. We never set ourselves up for disappointment that way. We just kind of went with the flow. Flew, kind of went by the seat of our pants and just enjoyed the moment. If we saw a nice hill that we wanted to climb or an area that we wanted to view from, we would do that. We've met a lot of wonderful people along the way as well. And it's just, it's a real time of reflection.
Thank you. So Suzanne, actually along that lines, again, sort of that instance of, did you ever take any down days? Like, was it like a 1 in 7 or?
The down days, they were infrequent if we planned them, but if we had a winded day, that was considered to be a down day for us. And we made the most of it, whether doing laundry or mending equipment or reevaluating how much food we had left. But down days that we planned, not necessarily, no. Like we didn't push ourselves every day. So like we weren't totally exhausted or wore out. We paced ourselves. We were enjoying the cruise.
So what I was gonna, if I don't have any more questions right now, so people, if you that are listening, if you have more questions about the trip itself, feel free to continue to post them. I was going to shift gears just a little bit and shift to a little asking you a few questions about the book itself, because I think that's like I think there's an opportunity to see that sort of the second part of your journey in a certain way. One is the physical part, and the other one is translating it into written form, that reflective piece. So, so very first question was this your first book?
Yes, it was our first book, and we didn't start the trip and complete the trip with a book in mind. We were focused on a fundraiser for our hometown charity, but every day I kept a journal and wrote interesting facts, like if we met individuals, or if the weather was bad, or we had to paddle through smoke from a forest fire. So every day I made notes. And then when the pandemic hit and we had all this time on our hands, we thought, you know what, why don't we compile the notes, put them into some form and make a book out of it. So that's what happened. It sort of transitioned into a book, but we didn't start out with the intentions of writing a book, no. I saw a question there. Someone asked what type of mats, sleeping mats we used, and we used the self-inflating Thermarest mats, and we found out that they smooth out any rocks and any bumps or anything, and make it quite easy for us to get to sleep. There's a photo there of a wolf print on the beach, and there's Carol's toes, just to show you how big that print was.
So why did you choose the title, or like Canoe for Change?
Canoe for Change was I think we're trying to incite a change in the way people perceive food security. So we were canoeing for a change in, of awareness, basically. And how we got that name was interesting. I went with a friend, Deborah, for coffee at a coffee shop, and I told her about our journey that we were planning on paddling across Canada, but we needed a name for our cruise, because we wanted to also raise funds for Loving Spoonful. So she came up with a few names, and then came up with Canoe for Change, and she polled all the people in the restaurant to see what they thought, and it was basically a hit. And we had a lot of other names planned too for our adventure, but that kind of stuck. So we thought, well, we'll just name our book Canoe for Change as well.
Nice. So we have a question from Teresa. What was your longest portage?
Okay, we'll have to break this down into kilometers. So we cycled 400.
Oh yeah, we across BC, it was 1,200 kilometers to get from the Pacific Ocean to the Oldman River. So we paddled 400 kilometers, we cycled 400 kilometers, and we walked with our canoe over the Great Divide for 400 kilometers. And that took
Better part of a month.
Yeah, a couple months, yeah.
So to answer your question, we cycled and walked 800 kilometers. That would have been our longest portage.
Well, 400 kilometers.
You went.
Yeah.
400 kilometers.
Yeah, 400 kilometer portage.
Yeah.
Yeah, walking.
You
we
went.
had blisters on our feet.
And we
I
didn't
was
do all, we
complaining
didn't
about
do
having
all
to
that
do
in one
3.
day. That wasn't a one-day thing. We had to camp, and we had to go, and yeah.
So we camp in ditches, and we'd camp at those little roadside picnic spots, or anywhere we could find a spot. It always worked out.
Yeah, mainly in ditches.
I was mainly in ditches, yeah.
Daniel actually just, he said you mentioned it earlier in the presentation, you did, but he was wondering if you could just shortly revisit and identify like what you learned about paddling with tides. Like, what was it you suggested again in terms of your lesson learned of how you paddle with tides?
Yes, so our experience was down the St. Lawrence River with the ever-changing tides, and the tides change. The further east you go, the tides intensity changes, and it changes time-wise with the day. So you'd have to read the whole chart to figure out how soon it comes and how soon it comes out as you go east. But the drop in water was quite severe. So if you're going with the tide as it goes out, you want to be more in the middle of the current of the river.
Mhm.
Just the opposite, when the tide is coming in, you want to be out of the main flow and be off to the side and paddle close to the shore. And there was a time when we wanted to, and we knew the tides were changing and fluctuating, and we knew that it was about time for us to get off the water and make camp. So we saw a, what do they call it? Not a fishing village, a harbor. We saw a harbor in Quebec, and we said, let's make for that harbor. And we could see it, and we were paddling. And before we got to it, we were sitting on the mud. And I thought, oh, isn't this great? So I thought, I'll just step out and see if we can walk the rest. Oh no, I couldn't do that because I sunk right up to my thigh. And the suction to get my leg back out, I lost my sandal. So I had to reach in and pull my sandal out. So now we're sitting in the canoe, looking at each other, like the canoe's on the mud, and we can see where we want to go. It's right there. But we have to wait an hour until the tide starts coming in so that we can get buoyant again and float to make it in. And, that was just the funniest thing. And it was just another one of those learning curves.
Yeah, and with the tides as well, you always have to make sure that you can get to the shoreline. So between Rivière-du-Loup and Trois-Rivières, there's about 100 kilometers of mud flats. So always, when you're working with tides, you need to make sure that the tide's high enough so you can actually reach shore to go to find a campsite. Otherwise, you're walking through mud for quite a ways
if you can
to
do
get
that,
to a campsite, and it's like dragging your gear and your canoe through the mud, which we did. We had to do that a couple of times, and it's no fun, especially after a long day of paddling, and you've got this extra effort, to try to get to your camp or to land.
Returning to the book for a moment, in writing the book, did it reveal to you any further insights on your trip across Canada?
Yeah, it kind of enlightened and rejuvenated me in my thinking that just how special Canadians are and how kind they are and how engaging they are. And everyone that we met, in some way they wanted to be part of our journey. I had that sense. They would bring us fresh food to eat. They would offer us shelter. They would offer their vehicle for us to go get groceries. Any way that they felt that they could contribute, they did so, and it was just heartwarming. It was really just a sense of joy. It's unbelievable.
We met, I would say 99% of the people that we met were just, so friendly and helpful and amazing and interested in our trip. And, in today's times, it's hard to imagine that 99% is quite a high number, but it's true. Once you get out there and you start traveling, and I'm sure a lot of other people realize that as well, generally people on our planet are friendly. It's sometimes just the social systems that, make their living situations more difficult, but generally people are pretty friendly, I think. And it's, kind of renews your spirit for humanity. And that really did that for us when we paddled across Canada. It was amazing.
And we met individuals who were doing their own trip or had done their own trip, and their stories were remarkable. And it paled, made ours pale towards what they had accomplished or were going to accomplish. So I was like amazed at that.
Sort of one final question on the book. What was one of the most surprising things you may have learned in writing the book?
Oh, it costs a lot of money to self-publish a book. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we found that out. But we didn't do this to make money.
Of course,
we did it to leave a journal of sorts, maybe to pass down to our grandchildren, or.
Yes. Yeah.
We didn't do it to make money.
It was fun.
It was fun.
It was a pandemic project during long hours of lockdown. We just thought we'd challenge ourselves and write a book, and we relived the adventure. It was great.
Yeah. And we had a tough but fair editor, and she was like relentless. And I just didn't realize how poor a writer I was until she straightened me out.
We learned a lot from her, that's for sure.
She didn't make me lazy, I'll tell you.
Actually, I think I have one more question left, so I'm throwing it open again to the community, and those other members who or possible members that may be here today. If you have any final questions, please feel free to reach out at this point in time. I think the last question I have for you, I think you've actually already touched on it in a number of instances. So if I'm having you repeat, it's not a big deal. But we're sort of reflecting back on your journey, and obviously, as it comes through when you read the book in particular, there was not just a physical journey. There was also a journey of personal development, and there was a very strong sense of spirituality that seems to have been part of not only the planning and the idea to initiate it, but the movement through it. Could you offer any sort of final insights or just final thoughts to the people here today?
Yeah, this journey for me was it put me into a different state of mind. Maybe before this journey, I would worry too much about details, but after doing this journey, I do not sweat the small details of anything. Whatever comes in life that seems monumental, it's like, it's no big deal, because after overcoming so many obstacles and maneuvering around so many obstacles, it just puts you in a different mindset, and it's really made me stop and smell the roses more and just relax. And I've also learned that I can put my total trust and faith in my life into my paddle partner, because she is remarkable. And
I love a guy like that.
Nice. Those are some serious brownie points there, dude.
Yeah.
But when you really spend that amount of time in a canoe in some adverse conditions, you really rely on your partner. And there was times when we disagreed. Like, I can read a compass, Carol can read a compass, but if we explain to each other how, as individuals, we read a compass, I don't understand her thinking, and vice versa. But
my wife would say the exact same thing about me.
Oh,
we,
really? Oh,
but we
that's good.
know where we want to go. So you have to put that trust
Yeah.
so much into your paddling partner. And we had our disagreements, but we worked them out right away so it wouldn't boil over or fester or explode. But when those moments got to really a point, we kept our distance in the canoe. I stayed in the front and Carol stayed in the back. No, I'm just kidding here. But seriously, you really have to have faith in your partner and go with their instincts and appreciate their judgment of what they're going to do.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
Yeah, and I've learned too that you can do anything you put your mind to. There was a question just that popped up a minute ago. Was it, more mentally or was it physically? Well, it's a good question, but I think most of it is mental. If you have the right frame of mind and you're determined to do something, you can do anything, no matter what age. And I think sometimes, when you're so determined to do something, that you set out to, for us, it was paddle across Canada, you kind of ignore those hardships. So you kind of override it mentally. You've got blisters on your feet, but you're determined to go to the end. It's not going to stop you. Or, you're tired, but sometimes you just have to stop and take a break. And I don't think there was any time during the journey that I ever wanted to quit because I was so determined to make it to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when a picture is so big like that, go across Canada, when we first started out, I think it was overwhelming for us because we only did, like Carol said, 10 kilometers. And then we thought, oh no, how are we going to do this? But if you just do small increments every day, baby steps, and just knock it off and knock it off. At the end of the trip, when we did approach Petrie Island coming back, I was kind of like, I did a lot of reflecting self-reflecting that last 10 kilometers. And I thought to myself, all the great people we've met and all the great sites I was like, I didn't want it to end. I did want it to end because I did want to go home, but I didn't want it to end. I wanted to keep going. And I kept visualizing of all the great memories and all the people and all the sites we saw and the experiences and the campsites. And I was torn. I still wanted to keep going somewhere.
Well, thank you for that. So at this point in time, I've run to the end of my list of questions. Does the community have anything else they'd like to ask of Glenn and Carol?
All the questions have been great.
Oh, I know this has been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so very much for all that you've offered up tonight, and for not only the time but for the thoughtful responses. But any other questions? All right. Well, then on that note, going once, going twice. On that note, then I'd like to take this opportunity to say, Glenn and Carol, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate the opportunity to have had a chance to chat with you this evening, and really appreciate the very thoughtful and insightful responses and the way you sort of just open yourselves up to us this evening and shared. So for that, thank you very much. So on that note, we'll draw today's seminar to a close. But before we end, I need to kick it to Mark, because Mark, what lies in your future?
What's coming up? Next week, February 23rd, adaptive paddling. And Don and Pauline are going to do a session on what they do for a living, which is to have people with mental and physical disabilities get out paddling. Their criteria for being able to paddle is if you're in a PFD, you have to be able to float face up. Other than that, they'll find a way to make it work. So that could be very interesting. On Wednesday, March 2nd, Aeronautical Maritime Search and Rescue. So these are the people in Trenton who go out in the helicopters and so on to look for people when you push that little red button on your spot. We've had a number of presentations before on search and rescue from the ground point of view. Now we'll get it from the air point of view. As mentioned earlier, a fellow named Robert Boggs, who you may have heard of, is going to do a session, Weather 101 for outdoors. And, you know, not so much as was done last year about weather lore, but more about, you know, if you're out there and your radio doesn't work and you're not in cell phone range, how do you stick up the finger and know what you're going to do? And then the last one on Wednesday, March 16th, Dr. Glenn Kenny is going to do a seminar on hot and cold weather and when you're out in it and exercising. So basically hyperthermia, hypothermia. I came across him because University of Ottawa has a lab called HEPRU, and they do experiments on people to see how they react to heat. And their experiments are used to develop government regulations and have been used, for example, the hydro people or the electricity people, sorry, in California, they've had to redo their hours of work based on the studies from Glenn and his team. So that could be very interesting and very useful for people who paddle in the shoulder seasons or in the hotter summer. And that's what we have for the rest of the year.
Well, excellent. Thank you for that, Mark. So with one final note, everyone, just a reminder for those of you who dropped in just partway through. First of all, thank you for still making time to come. We will be posting this to the RACCC's YouTube channel. Can't promise when it's going to pop up, but it will be there. And it will join our ever-growing library of videos that have been pulled from